All right, I think we are ready now to speak with Cassandra Fairbanks, who I know has been kind enough to host part of this vigil earlier in the marathon stream that we've had going for the last over 24 hours. Hi, great to see you, Cass. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yes, I couldn't for just a second, but that's just because Zoom always mutes our guests every single time. So, yeah. So I know that we've all, you and I and Susie, we've all been through every single one of these vigils, from the Reconnect Julian vigil all the way through. And I was wondering if you could give some of your insight into how you feel things have developed since the last Unity 4J vigil. Even if that outlook is bleak, just your perspective on the developments we've seen.
Well, unfortunately, there hasn't been much change. It's become normalized, which was, the biggest concern. People just out of sight, out of mind, and that's, obviously terrible. So it's really great that you guys are doing these to keep people reminded that he is still in isolation and being treated worse than pretty much all of our inmates ever. So yeah,
Definitely.
it's for sure.
Definitely in the sense of not being able to have any access to medical care. And one of the things that I find really interesting about that, that maybe a lot of people don't know, but that I saw when Susie wrote her article about Julian Assange's situation before he was cut off, which was that in the medical records that are publicly available, if you look at WikiLeaks, they host those records. Apparently, the tooth that is broken, what that happened when guards put an object in Assange's food and he bit down on it, and that's the reason that he needs such dental care. So I think that the level of torture that has been going on since before he entered the embassy is astounding. So just raising awareness of those facts that people often don't know is one of the few things that we can do, I suppose. But
yeah, it's horrible. I mean, it breaks my heart to think about it. And it feels very helpless because there's not, we can't just go break him out of the embassy as much as we would love to. So it's, we're stuck doing online vigils and tweeting and writing articles, and it almost feels like yelling at a wall sometimes. So it's great that we have, these things where you can see that there's other people who are just as frustrated, I guess.
Definitely. And I think, the fact that we're willing, or not willing, but trying to keep this up, even when there is very little new news to report, it is one of the most difficult aspects of it is that what can you say when there's only silence coming from the embassy, and there's no kind of news updates to report. But I think that at the same time, as you've kind of indicated, it's more important than ever to keep talking anyway. So that's what we're doing. And I know that you've been continually covering this through your independent journalism and raising awareness as much as possible. What do you think some of the viewers and listeners can do as acts of solidarity? How can they express support for Julian at this time?
Well, one of the people that I interviewed yesterday had a great idea, which was writing to the Nobel Committee and urging them to give him the Nobel Peace Prize, which he should have won every year for the last 10 years anyway. I mean, realistically, because then instead of just being an imprisoned publisher, he'd be Nobel Prize winning publisher.
Absolutely.
And fight harder, because it's insane. I mean, this whole thing is absolutely ridiculous to begin with, but if we could get him more, awards and recognition, things like that. I hadn't really heard that idea before. I think that's a good one. Going on WikiLeaks shop, but I always say this, buying merch, wearing it out, start conversations, urge your local reporters to remember that this could happen to them. It could happen to anybody, depending on who's in power. If any journalist could get a great leak or scoop or something, and be facing the US government the same way Julian is, as if they're doing their job the way that they should be. So it's important to remind people that, you know, this could be them, they could be next. And by ignoring what's happening to Julian, they're kind of setting themselves up to be in this danger and in this situation, or, you know, their colleagues or friends. So yeah, I think that those are pretty good ways. We talk about, you know, petitioning government and public officials a lot, but I think that we also need to be pressuring the press to speak out, because they could be next.
Yeah, and I think that not only pressuring them, but kind of pointing out and discussing the hypocrisy. As we said in the last segment, we noted the fact that, you know, the Guardian, who benefited from WikiLeaks's publications, turns around and has published, you know, multiple smears against Julian since he's been cut off and isolated. And so I think, you know, even if we can't persuade those types of outlets to report on Julian Assange accurately, we can call out their hypocrisy at the very least, and that's one of the important things we have to do as this situation continues, I guess.
That's one of the amazing things. All these outlets and journalists that, you know, trash Julian all the time, they've reported on his leaks or his publications. He's been a great source for journalists for years now, and has, you know, contributed to some of the biggest stories in the world, not even just America, the world. And they're, you know, trashing him, but it's really counter to, you know, their own interests, because everybody has gotten good stories from WikiLeaks.
Definitely. And I think that, you know, and I've said this before during this vigil, but I'll say it again, you know, when people like Mike Pompeo call WikiLeaks a non-state hostile intelligence service, it's so inaccurate from multiple perspectives. And one of them seems to be the fact that, you know, WikiLeaks makes huge efforts not only to vet their information and the files they receive as accurate as real documents, but they also make sure to remove they redact names to protect people out in the field, and they also removed the harmful or the parts of malware, for example, in Vault 7 that could have been used to kind of put the weapons of Vault 7 in the hands of, you know, teenagers and everybody around the world. So they've been very careful in the way that they publish this information, which is overlooked by the press, by the Mike Pompeos of the world, and everyone else.
Right. And it's so funny because Mike Pompeo has tweeted positively about WikiLeaks before he joined the swamp. You know, everybody loves WikiLeaks until it doesn't benefit them anymore. And
so unfortunately true.
Published things that I disagree with recently, very recently, and I still recognize the importance of it, and I would never stop supporting them over it. And it's just crazy to me how people, you know, they love him one second and then they hate him the next. And I feel like they're just not getting the point.
I completely agree. I definitely
Mike Pompeo is a great example of that, because he was tweeting about WikiLeaks before he was the swamp. So.
And I know a lot of people that support Trump have, you know, wondered why he doesn't pardon Julian Assange. Can you give us any insight on why you think he hasn't, and also how it is that pressure can be brought on him to, you know, protect Julian Assange or to pardon him preemptively?
Well, me and Kim.com talked about this yesterday, but I think he's a coward. I think that he also should have pardoned Flynn. Flynn is losing his home for but the only reason that Flynn's being targeted is because he worked with Trump. And the fact that Trump is not helping out the people who are now being targeted because they helped him shows a really big character flaw, in my opinion. I think that we can keep pressuring him, but until he grows a pair of balls, nothing's going to change. So,
unfortunately, extremely true. No, it's fine. It doesn't offend me at all. I'm sorry if it offends our viewers. I don't think it really matters too much. But I think that you're right, and I think it's really disappointing because I think a lot of people want to, even if they disagreed with Trump ideologically and from the perspective of policy, I think a lot of people wanted him to be the anti-establishment candidate anyway, and saw that at least as disrupting the status quo. And it's disappointed so many people to see him falling into the status quo and becoming just another kind of establishment stooge. Do you have any hope that he might pull out of that and show some independence?
I mean, I know that I've spoke to people who work on the Hill and who work with the White House and are very close to Trump, and they've said that he has a positive view of Julian, he has a positive view of WikiLeaks. They told me that he was asking about their sourcing and things like that before. I don't want to go too into that on here.
Yeah, but, fair enough.
Everybody, basically, the line that I get from everybody who knows him is that his view is in line with Hannity. And Hannity is obviously very pro WikiLeaks. He's interviewed Julian. He talks about and reports on their stuff all the time. So I think that, the interest is there, and I think that he does care. He's just a coward. And right now with this Russia witch hunt, he's doing everything that he can to not look bad because optics. But he's forgetting that none of the people who are going to care about the optics of this would vote for him anyway. Like, they don't matter. This doesn't matter. Like, the optics do not matter at all. Like, he just needs to grow a pair and do it, get it done. And if they cry and they whine about it and, go into conspiracy theory mode, then fine, screw it. Who cares? They wouldn't vote for you anyway. Like, I don't know.
No, I think that's really accurate, because I think the people that, in addition to the whole issue of pardoning Julian Assange preemptively, there's the fact that the Trump has not seemed to, hold up many of his campaign promises in the sense of, for example, anti-war, getting out of other countries' businesses, et cetera, et cetera. And so to what extent do you think that is a product of the fact that this unelected power structure continues through no matter what president is elected, and is really the entity that creates a consistent policy between candidates as different as Barack Obama and Donald Trump?
I mean, it's obviously there's, people who are running this that are not Donald Trump. We knew this. We've known it. I mean, when we had George Bush and then we elected Obama, who could not have been more different on paper, but it continued to be the same, continued drones, continued the wars. I mean, this guy ran on hope and change, and we got exactly the same. I mean, I feel like it was a long shot and wishful thinking to even pretend that things were going to be different, even though we did elect a very anti-establishment person. And I mean, it was worth a shot, but I don't think that things are ultimately going to change until, the deep state's gutted, and that's not going to happen without a huge fight. So I don't know.
Do you think, I know that prior to releasing Vault 7, Julian Assange, quoted the famous line about shattering the CIA into a million pieces and scattering it to the wind. And I think that, in what ways do you think that we could even begin to continue fighting against this establishment and deep state? Because it seems as if they are just destroying anyone who goes up against them.
I mean, I don't know. I think that Julian has been the best at fighting this. People providing information to WikiLeaks, the heroic leakers who have given them information that they can get out to the public. I think that that's the most effective way that it can be fought. And I think that that's why Julian's in the situation that he's in. He's the only person who had the tools and the guts to actually take on, these horrible institutions. And I mean, look what's happened to him. It's not exactly going to motivate more people to try and fight. And that's exactly what they want. I don't know.
No, I completely agree. And I think that,
I'm really like grim. I'm sorry.
No, it's I think that's, I think if we don't recognize how bad the situation is, then we can't accurately or effectively deal with it. And so I think discussing, where things are at, honestly, is a really important part of the vigils that we're continuing here. And so I think if we sat here for 30 something hours and pretended things were more hopeful than they were, then that doesn't do a service to Julian Assange in the effort to help him, in my opinion. But
Very true.
so I know that recently there was the date of the 19th, which was the anniversary of Julian Assange entering the embassy. There were a lot of demonstrations of solidarity around the world on that date. What, in your opinion, come in the future, like between this vigil and the next one, do you have any ideas about ways that the public can kind of enact their own acts of solidarity? Because I feel as if we can do so much sitting here speaking about it, but I really hope that the audiences do take it on themselves to also go act in the interest of Julian as well.
I mean, people can protest. Civil disobedience would be great. I mean, I probably shouldn't be encouraging that, but if you wanted to take one for the team, go for it. People asking questions. Almost anybody can go to the White House press briefings. Go try and get some questions in. Write to the Nobel Committee. There's lots of different things that people can do that are varying degrees of commitment. But as long as you're doing something, I mean, even tweeting helps. So I don't know.
I agree. And I mean, considering the level of media bias and vitriol against Julian Assange, I think sharing on social media and tweeting is a really significant thing to do for anyone and everyone who wants to support this cause. And it's mind-blowing the degree to which it is so much the people against the establishment in this fight. And I think, Julian Assange has really crystallized the sense that, it's not one party versus another party, it's the people versus the establishment.
Right.
And so that's one of the things that that I take away from this whole thing.
Yeah, and it's been really great watching people from all over the political spectrum on here and at the vigils that took place all around the world on the 6th anniversary. I mean, there were people who were socialists standing next to people who used to work at Breitbart, and really right-wing people, holding banners together with people who love communism. Like, it was just great. It was great to watch, and nobody was fighting. Everybody had common cause. And I think that, people uniting like that is a very big threat to anything that we need to change. I always say, like, with war, the right and the left mostly agree on this. And if we could stop fighting for 5 minutes and just try and focus on an issue, we could probably, make some changes. And Julian is a great example of that. Rambling.
I agree. And I agree. And I think that part of what the media has done over the last 5-10 years and before that as well, obviously, is to keep those anti-war left and right groups separate in any way possible, and to maintain and create that division. Because, as you said, if people actually united in not only solidarity with Julian Assange, but against the military-industrial complex, I think that's what they're really, truly afraid of.
And they should be, because we would kick ass if we all just stopped squabbling over stupid things and just focused and, stood together when it mattered. Unfortunately, in this political climate, it's a little more tricky than normal, but I think we can get it done.
Absolutely. And I think one of the advantages of social media is that we can slowly break those echo chambers, but sometimes it definitely seems like an uphill battle, for sure. And I know we talked about this on the last vigil, but I just wanted to ask you again, for the viewers that didn't tune in last time or didn't hear your segment last time, as an independent journalist yourself, how have WikiLeaks publications affected, well, not only affected your journalism, but kind of provided the basis for your journalism?
Well, obviously they provide tons of content for people to dig through, and there's always something new that you can find if you sit down and just start typing in keywords and searching. I mean, I can't even count the number of articles that I've written based on WikiLeaks stuff. And they also really help promote independent journalists, which is amazing because they have a massive platform and they use it to boost up people who otherwise wouldn't be heard, people who are anti-war and things like that. They don't get mainstream media attention. They're never going to work for, legacy outlet. And WikiLeaks will, help give you that boost, so that your writing can reach people, and that's a massive gift to any journalist, but especially one that's overlooked by the more mainstream and corporate outlets.
No, I completely agree. And I like seeing the array of different independent journalists that WikiLeaks does, retweet, promote, and, encourage, because I think that for a lot of us, unlike the mainstream media, a retweet from WikiLeaks is like one of the best, confirmations, validations of your work that would ever be possible. I mean, at least for myself, it's better than any sort of like award. So I think that one of the ways that we can continue to support them in their fight against censorship and persecution is to keep writing not only about what's happening now, but what has happened in the past that got overlooked by legacy press. There are a lot of different issues to cover on that, but I think that's at least one thing that we can do. But if it wasn't for WikiLeaks, though, would you have even been able to function as a journalist? I know I've talked to you about this before, but I wanted to kind of hash over it again for the viewers that weren't around last time.
Yeah, probably not. I would never have went into journalism, honestly. I was, an audio engineer, animal rights activist. I wasn't politically involved. I only joined Twitter so I could follow WikiLeaks. I had no idea what I was doing. I just joined it because I knew that they were tweeting information. And I got involved and started writing because I was just so obsessed with what they were doing. So I, blame WikiLeaks for me. All the trolls that hate me, it's WikiLeaks' fault. Sorry, just kidding. But I'm sure I'm not the only one, but they definitely changed the entire course of my life. So very thankful for that.
Absolutely. I think it's great that they inspire people, like we've said before, across the political spectrum in a way that just is totally unique. It seems to attract people, no matter what side they're from. All of the people that support WikiLeaks seem to value truth above ideology. And that's the one thing that we all seem to be the same on. And, that's what the Legacy Press wants to distract from when they write these smear pieces.
Right. Agreed. What we should do? We need to get Kim Kardashian on this because she's able to get some pardons. We need to start
Absolutely.
hitting Kanye. Be like, hey, you guys are the only ones who seem to be able to make pardons happen. Get on it.
Yeah, really. And I think that's been really disappointing for me to watch is Trump kind of pardoning this array of people and then nothing is said about Julian Assange. I really wish that his base could pressure him into realizing that it's such an important issue to his base, to his voter, constituency, I guess. But
yeah, they try. It's impossible though. Seemingly, he kind of just does what he wants. I don't think anybody can really predict what Trump's going to do. So I don't know. He's kind of a wild card.
Definitely. One of the things I've been asking all of the panelists during this vigil especially is to kind of express even if Assange can't watch this vigil, and we really don't know whether he'll ever, be able to, what would you say to him if he could do this? Because I feel like even though we have this huge wall between this vigil and Assange, I want to keep the center, like the focus on the fact that he is still in the embassy, and kind of not talking about him in a sense of past tense, because
Right.
I just feel like that's important. So
Yeah, just stay strong, keep fighting. We know that he will. So I don't know. I don't think there's anything I could say that I haven't already. I think he's an absolute hero, and I'm glad that WikiLeaks is continuing to function, even though he's personally isolated at the moment, because it really shows that even if they continue fucking with him, WikiLeaks will still continue, and there's still going to be people who fight, and stopping him won't stop WikiLeaks. So I think that's important, and so bravo to him and everybody who's been working on keeping it going during this horrible time period.
absolutely. And I think that, one of the maybe possible ways to sort of persuade somebody like Donald Trump might be to remind them that, their historical legacy is going to be pretty shameful if he doesn't pardon somebody like Julian Assange. And I was wondering as well, what's your take on is history so decided by the fake news media that this will be portrayed, in your opinion, as kind of like the Guardian's hit pieces as the historical record? Or do you think that we will remember Julian Assange as this amazing truth teller, and everyone who persecuted him will be remembered as kind of the enemies of truth?
Well, I hope that, people remember him as the hero that he is, and that the people who are persecuting him get looked at and judged very harshly. Unfortunately, the legacy media does tend to write these things, but we don't really know how that's going to work now that we have social media. I think that social media is changing things every day, changing people's perceptions, people's minds, and I think that that's going to have a long-term effect too. So it's hard to tell, but hopefully he's remembered properly and celebrated. I think that he should have a holiday named after him and be awarded a medal in a parade and welcomed out of that embassy as soon as possible. But I don't know, all we can do is keep fighting and keep telling the truth and reminding everybody how important he is.
Absolutely. And I think, and I know that in some of your coverage, you've referenced this, the fact that if anyone embodies the kind of vision of the founding fathers of the United States, it's Julian Assange. And he's written himself in op-eds, the fact that he's not somehow, against the United States. He actually thinks that the ideals at the founding of the United States are very admirable. And so it's such a shame to see America going after him in this hypocritical way. It's just...
Yeah, I think our founding fathers would be rolling in their graves. I honestly think that they would be horrified by this, because the entire point of giving us a free press was so that, the truth would always win. And Thomas Jefferson was often targeted by fake news and smeared, and, they printed gossip about him all the time. And he was like, despite this, even though there's all this fake media and this horrible stuff that gets printed that's not true, I believe that the truth will always win. And therefore, I'd rather have no government than no free press. And I mean, that's one of our founding fathers. And I think that we really need to get back to that. It's really important. So yeah.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I think that, in that sense, it doesn't matter, again, I don't mean to be completely repetitive, but no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, I think we can all agree that the way Julian Assange has been treated by the United States has been so deeply hypocritical compared with the pretense of moral authority and exceptionalism that we present to the world, while, committing huge human rights abuses, working with regimes like Saudi Arabia, and on and on and on. So it's unfortunate. Well, I know Oh, go ahead. Is there anything else that you would like to cover that we haven't talked about, or that you think the audience should know, or anything else at all?
I don't know. I feel like a broken record because I
Yeah.
just say the same. Like, there's not really anything left to say. I mean, he's a hero. He needs to be free, and Donald Trump needs to get on it, grow some balls. Basically it.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And one of the things that I just hope is that, you know, as we've seen with the musicians that provided us the cool, the amazing theme song for this visual, and we've seen the street artists in Melbourne, Australia, you know, go out and put pro WikiLeaks messages on the literal walls of the streets. I'm hoping that even though we do feel like broken records sometimes in addressing this, that it still reminds people enough that they will take it upon themselves to go and enact support, you know, in whatever way that they're able to. So I hope that this is at least serving some purpose in that, in encouraging that.
I'm sure it is. You guys are doing a great job.
Well, I think that in a moment, I believe Susie's going to come on and speak with Alistair. So thank you so much, Cassandra, for joining us this evening. And, you know, I hope that we are not forced to have another vigil. And I hope that, you know, a month from now that Julian Assange is reconnected with the world.
Me too.
But I know that... Not a problem. And I know that, you know, if he's not, then we will be back, and I know you'll be back, and we'll be discussing, you know, what we can do in that event. But
of course.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.